Hello, and welcome to the ILTV News Podcast. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV, and I welcome back our viewers and listeners. I have with me today Ambassador Arman Akopian, the ambassador from Armenia in Israel. He has been here for 3.5 years. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, I want to start, obviously, with the recent news. It's only been a couple of weeks since the ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Obviously, Armenia borders Iran, landlocked, with Iran being one of the borders. Tell me, how did the Iranian-Israel war impact Armenia?
Well, as you mentioned, Iran is a neighboring country. It's one of our 4 neighbors. Armenia is a landlocked country surrounded by 4 neighbors, and Iran is one of these neighbors. And of course, we've been monitoring very carefully what was happening around Iran because we could be very heavily afflicted with these consequences of that war. And there were news of possible radioactive contamination, things like that, that would inevitably affect Armenia as well. So we were following very closely. And of course, we do not take sides in this type of military conflicts. We just call for political, for restraints and call for the diplomatic solutions of such conflicts. And we are happy that some form of resolution was found and the war stopped.
Do you believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon program, a civilian nuclear weapon, civilian nuclear program?
Well, every country has a right to develop a civilian peaceful nuclear program. When it comes to military projects, of course, there are international laws and regulations about that. So we expect every country to adhere to those international regimes of nuclear non-proliferation.
Now, Armenia has very close relations with Iran, from what I understand, obviously, because it's a neighboring country. Can you talk a little bit about, how you are collaborating together, whether it's on infrastructure or in other ways?
Well, as I've said, it's a neighboring country, one of 4, and I think your listeners should know that with Iran we have history of relations and interactions that goes back for 26 centuries. It's 26 centuries of recorded history of interaction, recorded on a stone, on papyrus, on parchment, on papers. So Iran has always been there on our borders, and we always managed to find some modus operandi, as they say, a way to interact with Iran. We have a very good inner knowledge and understanding of Iran, of Iranian civilization. And our cooperation with Iran is mostly economic. It's a purely civilian cooperation. It's trade. It's energy projects like electricity swaps or natural gas supplies, infrastructure projects like transport corridors, things like that. Humanitarian, of course, the cultural exchanges, educational exchanges, tourism, of course, and Armenia being the only Christian country on Iran's border, it attracts a lot of middle-class tourists from Iran, which come to Armenia like in search of some liberties that are not readily available in Iran. So this is a general idea of our relations. Of course, Armenia, as I've said, being a Christian country, there is no ideological influence on Armenia, and my very presence here in this country is a proof of that.
For sure. And with regards to citizens, are there many Iranians that have moved to Armenia or vice versa? Are there Armenians living in Iran?
Well, in Iran, there is a very big Armenian. Armenia, like Israel, is a diasporic nation. Like the most of Armenians live abroad, outside Armenia, and also in Iran, a community that exists there for millennia. And there are very strong connections between Armenians living in Iran with Armenia, which is very close. It's just a few hours trip from Tehran or Isfahan to Yerevan, to our capital. There are Iranians who live in Armenia permanently, mostly people who are doing businesses in Armenia. During the last war, there were, of course, also some refugees who moved to Armenia during this last month, but they all returned to home. Yeah, and of course there are always, you can see Iranian tourists in Armenia.
And do the Armenians, when they were living in Iran during the 12-day war, were you in deep touch with them? You said there's a lot of close collaboration, so was Armenia able to help them in any capacity?
Well, many of them, they came to Yerevan just during this, it's the closest place you can come. Naturally, for Armenians living in Iran, Armenia would be the first choice to relocate for during these challenging times.
100%. Now, you're only the second Armenian ambassador, from what I was reading, that's been here in Israel.
Second resident.
Second resident ambassador, meaning one that's lived here in the country. So, and Israel does not have an ambassador in Armenia. So, how long have we had official relations, first of all? And why do you think it is that Armenia was only sent 2 resident ambassadors up until now, and that we haven't sent one to Armenia?
Well, we established diplomatic relations in 1992. Israel does have an ambassador in Armenia, but it's a non-resident.
A non-resident ambassador.
There is no embassy. There have always been non-resident ambassadors since 90s. It's not that this is a new, system that we are creating. There have always been ambassadors on both sides.
Right.
So Armenia had also non-resident ambassadors until 2020. Israel still has non-resident ambassadors.
What changed in 2020?
We opened a resident embassy here. Before that, we had also non-resident, like from the first ambassador was accredited from Paris, and then we had the ambassador from Cairo being accredited to Israel. And in 2020, we established a resident embassy here in Tel Aviv, and the ambassador was appointed, and I am the second resident ambassador of Armenia to Israel. As for why there is no Israeli embassy in Armenia, you should direct that question to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel. I cannot speak on their behalf. I can only say that we consider this a big obstacle on the way of expanding our bilateral relations, because it is difficult, just to work with one embassy being responsible for all the volume of relations. And right now, Armenia is one of only 3 post-Soviet countries that do not have resident Israeli embassies. And again, we consider that an obstacle, and we also believe that sends a wrong message.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that, as you mentioned, Armenia is so close to Iran and the security challenges of having such an embassy?
I don't think so, because Israel has embassies in countries and also in our region that have much stronger relationship with Iran than we do. But we see Israeli embassies there, so I don't think that there is a direct connection.
And what made Armenia decide to open the embassy in 2020? What shifted if it had been non-resident up until then?
Well, it's a natural process that started in the 90s. Yeah, it took a little bit longer, but we are here. So we've always wanted stronger and better relationship with Israel, because there are so many common things between Armenia and Israel, Armenian and Jewish people, a lot of similarities. And Israel excels in many areas like IT and agriculture, healthcare, and we are eager to partner with Israel in this in these areas, and we are here. Unfortunately, after my arrival, one thing follows, and one unfortunate development follows another, but we all are hopeful that this situation will see some normalization, and we will be able to proceed with the projects that we have been anticipating since 2020.
Yeah, and you mentioned 3 areas of cooperation. I mean, are those areas where there's very specific projects that you're working on? And also, what are those similarities that you're referring to between Armenian Israel and the Jewish people and Armenian people?
Well, we are both ancient peoples with very rich cultural heritage. We are both diasporic countries and nations. We are people who went through the genocides. We know what genocide is. So there are similarities in the way we think. We are like business-oriented people, intellectual activities-oriented people. So I always say that it should be very interesting for Armenians and Jews just to sit to talk, because there will always be a shared topic, something to talk about, to discuss.
Now, I know that obviously Azerbaijan and Armenia have more strained relations, but Azerbaijan and Israel actually have very close relations. Can you talk a little bit about how you in Armenia view the relationship between Israel and Azerbaijan, and does that have any impact on the way your country's relationship is with Israel?
Well, any country, the sovereign right of any country to choose its partners. Well, then, so it's a right of Israel and Azerbaijan to interact as freely as they wish. Of course, we've been there were some concerns for us, especially when it comes to arms supplies from Israel to Azerbaijan, because we've seen that we have the unfortunate experience in the Second Karabakh War of 2020. We see Israeli weapons and ammunition being used from the other side and causing destructions and devastations, for the civilian population. So that was an unfortunate and sad page in our bilateral relations with Israel, but we were willing to turn that page, and that page is basically turned. So we are, diplomats are there to be optimistic. We should be optimistic. We should think about the future, new projects, and we are willing to proceed. So of course we're monitoring that with concern, but as I've said, we are willing to proceed and to turn that page.
Now, with regards to Armenia and weapons related to Israel, does Armenia also purchase weapons from Israel, or is there?
No, the military defense cooperation has never been a part of our relations. Our cooperation, no.
No relation at all. Is that something that is aspirational?
Not right now, no, not at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Now, despite the tensions, around the sort of the relations with Azerbaijan and the defense, issues that go on with Iran, Armenia and Israel do really maintain pretty good relations, as you're describing. It seems like they're very peaceful, as you said, since the 1990s. How would you characterize the current state, given the aftermath of October 7th, the recent Iran-Israel war? Like, where are things holding?
You mean for the Armenian-Israeli relation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, the important thing that we were able to, since 1992, although there were no resident embassies, we were able to keep the channels of communication open. And we always had this, dialogue, political dialogue, which was later institutionalized in the form of political consultations between our foreign ministry every year. And hopefully there will be one this year too. So the important thing that we are able to sit down and to talk to each other very honestly, freely. We're not afraid to discuss very sensitive issues that do exist. And I can say that the bigger part of my work here is to maintain the daily political dialogue with our Israeli counterparts. That's the most important thing. And another important thing for us, it's very important to work with the civil society, because both countries are countries with very strong and developed civil societies. And I spent a lot of time here working with the representatives of various NGOs.
What are some of those NGOs that you've worked with?
Well, a lot of them think tanks, NGOs who work in every possible. We're interested in NGOs who work in the area of interfaith dialogue, for example, like Jerusalem, City of Three Religions. I have very strong connections with NGOs who work for Jewish Christian dialogue, things like that. That's very important, given our presence in this country. Historic presence. Our church is present here, being one of the three custodians of the Christian holy sites in the Holy Land. So that's important. So the contact with the civil society is very important.
For sure. Now, one point of contention I know is the genocide. You mentioned how we've both experienced genocide, the Jewish people and the Armenian people, but Israel has not formally recognized the Armenian genocide, and that's despite the United States recognizing it finally under the Biden administration. What are Armenia's thoughts on this, and do you think there's anything that could be done to encourage Israel to take that move? Why have we not done it?
Well, first of all, the recognition of the Armenian genocide is not a precondition for us for good relations. We never ask for any country to recognize the Armenian genocide because we have excellent relations with many countries who do not recognize the Armenian genocide.
Okay.
So the initiative for the recognition of the genocide always comes from within the country. It's not that the Armenian government approaches another government and asks to recognize it. And it also happened in this country. In Israel, there were several attempts at the recognition of the Armenian genocide in the Knesset, and also passed one of the committees. And it's because of that, it's included in the school curricula, the Armenian genocide. And the initiative has always come from the members of Knesset, from civil society actors. As I've said, this is not a precondition. The recognition by Israel would be important because many countries, they look at Israel when it comes to the recognition of Armenian genocide. And there is this concern that Israel ignoring it equals denial. Israel does not deny it. And even more on the level of society, close to 80% of the public opinion in Israel is in favor of the recognition of the Armenian genocide. Very few people here deny it. So there is the state has to catch up with this public demand in the recognition of the Armenian genocide. But again, it's not something that we put on the top of the agenda. So I hope that someday that will happen. It will take time, but I remain hopeful that someday Israel will join this very long list of democratic countries who have recognized the Armenian genocide.
How many countries have recognized it?
I don't remember the exact figures. I guess it's more than 50. And also international organization as well.
Yeah. And do you think that possibly, I mean, I know that in the past it was because of our relations with Turkey, but obviously relations with Turkey are quite strained right now between Israel and Turkey. So maybe this is a year where something like that could potentially happen.
We do not want the Armenian genocide to be recognized by any country, if it's being put in the context of its relations with Turkey. That happened in Israel too, and occasionally we hear prime ministers and ministers of foreign affairs relations mentioning the Armenian genocide when they want somehow to, insult Turkey or gives a strong response to some Turkish criticism. We don't need this kind of recognition. We do not think that this is a very good thing. And I think that the Israelis and Jewish people would not be very helpful if somebody used the Holocaust for this kind of, political manipulation. So this is a purely moral thing. It should be placed in this moral context, not in the context of political consideration of today. Mm-hmm.
No, it makes sense what you're saying. With regards to the regional collaborations, the Abraham Accords, of course, are established really since around the time that the embassy was moved, in 2020. Yeah. And we have been talking a lot lately, certainly as we've come off the, again, Israel-Iran war, and if we would get to a ceasefire agreement with the Hamas in Gaza, that potentially we would be able to expand the Abraham Accords here, potentially with Saudi Arabia, Syria. And I actually recently was reading about Azerbaijan being very interested in joining. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the Abraham Accords, and is Armenia at all interested? It's a Christian country, but still it's a country in the region where it could be very open to being somehow a part of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we welcome any initiative that serves contributes to the improvement of general atmosphere in the region, in the Middle East and around it. And of course, we're following the developments. And so far, we see that it works more or less effectively. As for other countries like joining, it's the choice of any country. Well, I don't. It's a format that's been established for countries that, particularly Arabic countries, that do not have diplomatic relations or any kind of relationship with Israel. But I don't see how countries that have this relationship and diplomatic relations should be involved in that.
Well, it seems to me it would deepen the ties, right? Because the Abraham Accords, while they kicked off with
they are
countries,
very specifically, and the name already suggests Abraham. So these are the peoples who are considered descendants of Abraham.
Right? Wouldn't that
like
be
Semitic
Jews, Christians? That wouldn't be Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
Yeah.
I think it would be
not
Abraham.
any Muslim should be considered, and the name should be, because there will be a contradiction with the name, because the name suggests that these are as you know, the Arabs and Jews, they sometimes call each other cousins,
Right.
because both peoples are considered direct descendants of Abraham or Ibrahim
Right.
in Arabic. So when you involve other people who are not, fit very well in that biblical genealogy of countries, that looks a little bit strange. So, and especially when you try to involve the countries that already have good relations with Israel, have diplomatic relations and strong relationship. So it seems like the whole idea should be kind of reimagined or reinvented.
If it's going to go that route.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you feel if Azerbaijan did become one of the Abraham Accord countries? Would that impact Armenian relations at all with Israel?
Azerbaijan already have very strong strategic relationships with Israel. I don't see how they can. I don't believe they need the Abraham Accords in order to move to push their relations further. And it's their choice. If they are invited to join, then it's up to them.
And Syria also has been very active, not only with regards to discussions to the Abraham Accords or potential some kind of normalization with Israel, but also with Azerbaijan. Syrian leaders were recently in Azerbaijan and starting to become more interested in what's going on there in that region. Have you seen a similar thing, Syria to Armenia?
Well, with Syria, we have very strong relationship because our connection to Syria is very, very old. It goes back to the millennia, and also Syria is important for us because it is a home of very big Armenian communities.
A lot of Armenians live in Syria.
Of course, because after the genocide, the main destination for the survivors was Aleppo. So we call it the mother of all Armenian communities because this is where the Armenian diaspora originates, from the city of Aleppo. Because the survivors, some of them moved to the north, like my grandmother, who is a survivor of the Armenian Genocide. She moved to eastern Armenia, to what is now the Republic of Armenia. But the bigger part, they moved southwards to Syria, to Aleppo, and this is where the Armenian diaspora was actually born. And up to this day, there is a very big and strong Armenian community in Syria, and we are following very closely the current reorganization and the repositioning of Syria, and our main concern is that the rights of the minorities, and Christian minorities in particular, should be, protected. Because in the past we've seen our communities were attacked by ISIS, so there is a very unfortunate, experience that exists in that country. So in that sense, we are following very closely, remaining hopeful that this time it will be the more favorable conditions will be created for the minorities there.
Sure. I mean, and speaking of Christians in the region, the Middle East has certainly been a very challenging place for Christians. The number of Christians in the Middle East has dwindled substantially, and persecution is high. Talk to that, and what are the steps that you are doing as a country, but also what do you feel that the world needs to do?
Well, it's a very unfortunate event that the Christianity is endangered in its historical cradle. So this is where the Christianity originated in the Middle East, and now we see that in many countries the numbers are dwindling, as you mentioned, all over the Middle East. Yeah. So, and there have been a lot of attention to these issues, and from the United States, they have even special ambassadors who deal with this issue, and we are in contact with them because we are historically connected to this region. And Christianity has played a very, important role in our relations with the region.
Yeah. Well, how many Armenians live in the United States?
In the United States?
Yeah.
More than 1 million.
More than 1 million, because you said it's a diaspora, so it's like Syria, Iran, the United States. They're really all over the world.
Yeah. The biggest is in the United States. We also have big communities in France, in Russia, in the Middle East, in Australia, everywhere in the world. It's like the Jewish diaspora, more or less. The same.
Super cool. And how many Armenians live in Armenia?
It's 3 million.
Wow, so it's a really small country, 3 million.
Well, of the 10 million Armenians that live in the world, only 3 live in so it's like... As I've said, there are a few diasporic countries like Israel or Ireland or Armenia that have this big
Yeah.
communities.
Well, it's interesting. Israel has about 10 million people living here, of which 80% are Jewish, of course, and the other 20 are either Muslim or Christians. And then the diaspora is about the same size, but it's all the other 10 million are all over the world. No, it's really fascinating. Now, there's a lot of people probably watching this show that don't know much about your country. So I'm wondering if you can just tell me a little bit about the culture, the food, what it's like to be there. What is Armenia?
Well, first, if you want to know what it's like to be there, you have to go there because there are direct flights from Israel to Armenia, and it only takes 1 hour, 50 minutes to reach Armenia. So geographically, it's very close. You can go for a weekend. So
is it easy to get a visa?
Yes, you get online visa in 2 days, so it's very, very easy. Or you can get a visa upon arrival at the airport as well, if you wish. So what you need to know that Armenia is an ancient country with very rich cultural heritage that we are eager to share with the world, with very excellent food, excellent wine, great landscape and sceneries. So lots of ancient architecture. So it's a place to visit, and I urge your listeners to spend their vacation this year in Armenia.
What's the weather like?
Well, it can be hot in summer, but the good news is it's not humid. It's a dry heat.
Okay.
So at least in the evening, and if you find a shadow, you feel relief. You do not suffer from humidity. That's the good thing about the heat in Armenia. But the best season would be from like April, May, June, and then September, October. November could be tricky. Depends on the year.
No, that makes sense. And what about in terms of the Jewish community there? I know there used to be a bigger Jewish community, and now it's very small. How many Jews are in Armenia?
Oh, well, the last Soviet census that was in the 1980s, the figure was close to 5,000 Jews living in Armenia. Most of them, they came to Israel in the 90s, in the big aliyah from the former Soviet Union. Now the figures are less than 1,000. But what we've seen that after the war when the war in Ukraine started, a lot of people from Russia and Ukraine, they came to Armenia, and among them many Jewish people. So another second Jewish community was established in Armenia, and they have their organization called Jewish Home Yerevan. And now I think it is bigger than the old community. Which makes the local rabbi very happy because the synagogue is now full with people. So actually there are two Jewish communities, the old one and the new one, and they're merging. And a lot of this new, the people who came after the war in Ukraine, they made Armenia their home, and they applied for Armenian citizenship. And recently the chairman of that Jewish Home Yerevan was here in Israel, so I met with him. So it seems to be a revival of Jewish life in Armenia, which we are very happy about that.
What language do you speak in Armenia?
Armenian.
It's Armenian.
Armenian language.
And is that the only language, or are there like sub-languages?
Well, Armenia is 98% Armenian, so it's a very monoethnic country. Well, Russian continues to be understood and spoken to some extent, like depends on generation. Like people my generation, they speak it better. Younger people, they can communicate. But of course, English is now being more and more
used as well.
Yeah, we have also the minorities who speak their language, like the Yazidi minority who speaks a Kurdish dialect, the Syrian minority who speaks modern Aramaic dialect. There are Russians, Greeks, so yeah.
Wow. Now, we're going to run out of time, but I do want to ask about the Armenian Quarter here in Jerusalem. You mentioned, it's one of the keepers of the Christian faith. Talk about how many Armenians actually live here in Israel. And I know there's been some controversy around some of the lands and other things in the area, so maybe just brief us on that real fast.
Well, there are actually two Armenian communities. One is the old community that lives in Jerusalem. These are the beginnings of the Armenian community in Jerusalem goes back to the 5th century when the Armenian Patriarchate was established, because after the adoption of Christianity, Armenians started coming for pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and some of them remained here to assist other pilgrims. So this is when the Armenian community was established here, and it's been here since the 5th century, as I've said. There were some, after the Armenian Genocide, some survivors, they came because there was an orphanage in Jerusalem and some of them, they also remained here. And there is a big Armenian community which originates in the 90s. These are the people who are in the mixed marriages, Armenian Jewish marriages, because in the Soviet Union there were many mixed Armenian Jewish marriages. For Armenians, Jews were the third after Russians and perhaps Ukrainians in mixed marriages. And for the Jews, I think Armenians were the fourth or the fifth.
Okay.
So there were many mixed marriages, Armenian Jewish families, and some of them, they came to Israel. And today we have close to 10,000 Armenians living here, not only in Jerusalem, but in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and Petah Tikva, in Bat Yam.
It's not a small number.
Even in Beersheba, yeah.
And do they still, like, in Armenia, does the church still play a pretty key role? Is this a country of faith? And it's a Christian country, but it's the country where, like in Israel, as you've probably learned the last 3.5 years, we beat to the Jewish calendar. We have a lot of Judaism infused, even when you're not religious per se. Is it the same thing there? Is it a secular country?
Well, Armenia is a strictly secular country.
Strictly secular.
Yeah, because the church is separated.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, yeah.
But the church historically plays an important role in our society. So yes, it is present in the daily lives of people, yeah. A lot of people declare themselves believers and churchgoers. Yeah.
Is there anything else, Ambassador, before we sign off, that you feel that it's very important that you deliver? You want to make sure that our viewers hear or see?
Well, as I've said, I urge the Israelis, to go to Armenia, to discover Armenia. They won't be disappointed. It's a beautiful country, very close to Israel in terms of spirit and geography. You can go there for a weekend. I mentioned the summer months for the heat, but you can go for winter sports if you want to enjoy the snow or skiing. Armenia is your closest destination for that. So please consider Armenia as your next vacation destination.
Wonderful. Well, Ambassador Akopian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.